The show's name is straightforward, Samurai Jack. Jack is basically a superhuman swordsman in this Cartoon Network series. Part of the reason why he's super strong is because it's a fictional world and it's a cartoon, so he kind of got some cartoon logic going on, but that's not all. At one point, he was young, he grew up. Throughout the years, we could assume over the years he's been training to get stronger and growing up when it comes to his swordsmanship and just skills as a warrior. Even though we see him using a sword most of the time, don't get it twisted. He can just go full-blown, straight-up hand-to-hand combat based on his training. He's well-rounded, let's say that. That's why he has abnormally good reflexes. Like, look at these training methods. Balance training. No, I'm not talking about just no average fighter. I'm talking about fighting groups of skilled fighters all at the same time when they all have weapons. He's so skilled as a fighter, he's somehow able to use the light against a ninja to become invisible in the light. Like, what? He's learned not to rely on his eyesight too much, but his other senses, because he can still fight and function while blindfolded. When it comes to the topic of weapons, he's used every major melee weapon, handheld weapon you can think of known to man. You've seen it throughout the series, and even the games kind of hint at it. You know how you watch some sword shows, you can kind of tell when they want to be more grounded, they want to be more realistic based. This show in particular is not afraid to just go full-blown fictional. I mean, look at his arch nemesis of the series. He's pretty much unbeatable. He's completely invulnerable if you don't have a special weapon. Oh, that gives me onto the gear again about Jack's special sword. I mean, I'll just let the series explain it for me real quick.
A foolish samurai warrior wielding a magic sword stepped forth to oppose me. Before the final blow was struck, I tore open a portal in time and flung him into the future.
I do not age. Time has lost its effect on me.
That's a pretty clear summary.
This blade was forged from the righteous energy within thee.
It possesses the power to destroy this evil force.
Nothing of this world can harm me.
So throughout his adventures, he's fought all kinds of creatures, robots, mystical beasts. I mean, time travel, right? He would have to be superhuman to be able to deal with all this stuff. He's dubbed as a peak human, but that's definitely an oversimplification. Let's get into it. We've seen Jack move stuff like this with his legs, big stone stuff like this. We've seen him push. First of all, on one of his many adventures, he was apparently trained to be able to jump real good, to jump real high. So he got like crazy weightlifting training. And believe it or not, he eventually gets so strong to where he can jump around with ease with a heavy boulder like this on his back. In a weird way, you could argue this could increase his speed when you can just move around with heavy boulders like this on your back. Wouldn't that apparently increase your maneuverability? Like, these guys literally put boulders on his ankles and his wrists, and it was kind of like weight training this way. I'm actually going to use my own personal AI I personally have to calculate how big this would have to be as a bare minimum. I think we could assume that this boulder is at least the size or height of 2 Jacks in height and width at least. And he's able to lift this kind of weight and move with it, even though this seems to be approaching his limit. He even did this going up hills. This is basically like doing the strongest pull-ups. Stuff like this gets tricky to calculate because in each scene, this rock looks different in different sizes. So I'm just going to do a low ball in real quick and just assume this boulder is made out of granite and assume that this is like the height of Jack. Let's just assume it's the height of Jack because it changes in different angles. So if we go off this angle on the low end, this rock had to be at least 15 tons on the lower end, so over 10 tons. But if we go by how it looks on this angle, it looks much bigger. It looks like 2 Jack's heights. My first calculation was assuming that Jack was 5'8" and the boulder was 5 feet 8. You see what I mean? It's funny how the calculations get drastically different. When I assume this boulder is double his height, it goes from 15 tons to 133 tons based on my personal AI calculations. So on the lower end, 15 tons. On the higher end, it goes to 130 tons. So it depends on where you want to go. Like, do you want to assume it's to 15 tons or 130 tons? It's up to you, really. That's basically like saying he could lift or support the weight of 260,000 pounds, guys. That basically means compared to real life humans, Samurai Jack can lift 200 times plus more weight than the strongest humans in real life. Like, he can lift that much more than real life humans. And we're just getting started with his strength. Because even though this rock changes in different scenes, the size of it looks different in different scenes. With enough training, this heavy rock that he used to struggle with, he eventually started getting better while using these weights. Even with more beings getting on top of it, boosts his strength even more. He eventually started being able to sprint up the hill, do pull-ups with this weight, started being able to do front flips with this weight, and then eventually started becoming light. He's unrealistically physically strong by a large margin. I mean, Jack technically had to battle against being that apparently unrealistically large being that apparently weighed 700 tons.
Weighing in at a mere 700 tons.
I mean, look how small Jack looks in comparison to certain angles. And despite Jack getting crushed by this being, Jack can kind of survive and get out of this despite this ridiculous weight. So it kind of adds up with the Jack being able to lift hundreds of tons. With all this strength I've already talked about that can lift over hundreds or even more, he can lift hundreds of tons apparently by that boulder feat. He can lift that, move around with it on his back and jump really high with it on his back and can run around with it with ease. With all this raw muscle, how hard do you think his blunt punches or strikes would feel like? Like, I know his sword has piercing damage and stuff, but his blunt hits would have to be crazy too. I mean, think about it. The weight of his swings kind of add up with how much he can lift when it comes to his muscle, the stuff he always has to consistently chop up. I mean, I know the sword is powerful and all, but he has to have weight behind his hits to fight all these superhuman beings or gods, even things that are way larger than himself. We've seen him constantly chop up things, robots, aliens, monsters, all this. All them, chopping them all up, even without his blade. We've seen him just punch and send things flying. We even seen him slugfest with Aku himself without the sword. His punches will basically feel like an 100-ton boulder falling on your face, if we're being honest. If it's anything like what he can lift up with ease. This is being considerably lowballed too, guys, without even counting his sword's cutting power and piercing damage. Now, if we actually add the blade onto it, it just gets worse because it's piercing damage. I definitely think with all these creatures we see him take on, sword clashing with Aku himself, somebody can easily chop down buildings. I definitely think he could, based on his cutting power, slice buildings down the middle. I think that's just pretty much confirmed at this point. He's literally sword fighting with Aku. Somebody can slice houses and crap. I mean, look at stuff like this he has to take on and slice with one swipe. Look how he strikes beings that far, kick this being up, kick this pillar down, like big beings. All this, he can hit with that much weight, things that are building size. It would actually be disrespectful if you say he couldn't cut buildings in half like this, for example, at this point. You remember earlier I talked about Jack taking on a 700-ton sumo? Well, I'm going to talk about this some more. This being is 700 tons and jumped this high, landed on Jack. He didn't even move, and he survived this, and it shook the whole arena. This gives you an idea of how durable he is, too. It starts adding up with how hard he can hit. You see what I mean? His body withstanding getting hit by beings, landing on him, shaking the whole arena. Matter of fact, the Scotsman and Jack working together, fighting this army of stuff together. It's really hard to get a time frame on how much all of this happened, but the weight of their strikes working together created an explosion that flattened all these buildings to where it was completely cleaned out, and these two were the only ones left. There's weight behind his swings. Without counting blades, I guess one way, you can get an idea of his concussive blunt strikes. Is his very own durability to blunt force, one could say. I mean, he can withstand a lot for a human. Based on the ridiculous stuff he can survive, like falling from space with enough speed to catch fire and create a huge explosion like this and literally stay conscious after that, is ridiculous. That kind of gives you somewhat of an idea of the stuff he can survive, the concussive pressure he can survive. A fighting show wouldn't be complete unless we actually seen a character fight a dark, negative emotion version of themselves. Jack had to do this. And him basically fighting himself pretty much starts a forest fire from each of their blows. Like, he's literally fighting an exact duplicate of himself. The durability Jack has, he can damage beings with similar durability to himself. You see what I mean?
Hurts, doesn't it? Not as much as this is going to hurt you.
I mean, the weight of his strikes is so crazy, not just counting his durability, the weight of his strikes is so crazy, he's clashing with himself and made this seriously gigantic explosion just from the weight of their clash. This definitely looks like he can level a whole town or a whole block or a few city blocks just from clashing with himself. This is a no-brainer. Yeah, this pretty much proves Jack can literally quake an entire town to its very core just from the weight of his sword swings. And believe it or not, Samurai Jack can kind of cheat and kind of ask for more power.
Let my sword be your instrument of justice.
Unbelievable.
This is proof he got a power up because before, when he was trying to hurt this same bot, he couldn't do it until he called for ancestral help. I don't want to necessarily say he's on the same power level as Aku. If they were on similar power level, why is it that Jack pretty much has to tell Aku to fight him on his terms? You see what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to say he's on his level because it's literally stated.
You said no superhuman strength.
So Aku definitely had to limit himself, but I still think occasions like this are pretty cool. It pretty much shows that when it comes to raw hand-to-hand skills, Jack is just on a whole nother level of fighting skill. You guys know of the famous term, speed is weight. Part of the reason why he could be able to hit so hard is because of his physicals, of course, but it could be partly because of his speed. He could swing his fist or weapons really fast. That could be part of the reason. Let's talk about his fighting speed. He did this while blindfolded, by the way. His reaction time is so crazy to where he can make the bow and arrows look slow in comparison to his fighting speed. This is a super obvious example of his fighting speed. There was these bounty hunters that all was about to ambush him. Before one of these drops of water could hit the ground, he was able to react to all of this stuff and do all of this. Land like 10 plus hits and throw all this stuff back before the drop can hit the ground. Are you serious? Like, yeah, that's some crazy fighting speed. See, they slowed it down for us. This is how it looks in real time and how much things happened in that little bit of time frame. Yeah, all of that happened that fast. I mean, what do you expect when it comes to his fighting speed? We've actually seen him deflect bullets with his sword. Kind of like on some Deadpool stuff we see in the movies where he deflects bullets with his sword. That's what Samurai Jack did in this particular occasion. I mean, we're talking about a guy that we've literally seen dodge actual sunlight. It happened more than once. So you could say his fighting speed or the speed he can swing his sword or react to stuff is barely under light speed. Maybe he's 80% the speed of light, 90%, something like that. Like he's just under it. Dodging rays of light. Did you guys know Samurai Jack was this mighty? Did you know he can lift that much weight? Yeah, they definitely got to stop calling him peak human. The guy can lift over 200 times more than the strongest men in the world in real life. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not peak human. Samurai Jack also believes you should hit that like button, guys. It would really help me out. And thanks, donators. I'm glad you are enjoying your time on the channel. Make sure you check out the playlist on the channel to see other How Strong videos. If you like what this channel is offering, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys later.